This was kind of expected. After all, how could a minion made from borrowed power compare to the real deal? It made sense that the minion was weaker and smaller. Jinchul felt a little better seeing this. Maybe this is as strong as Hunter Sung can get. Not that it mattered. Jin-Woo's fighting skills were still way beyond what Jinchul could even imagine. And contrary to Jinchul's opinion, Jin-Woo himself was delighted with the results. The voice of the monarch has awakened the dead's fighting spirit. S shadow enhancement successful. S to shadow will start with a base level of 13. As scared. This was the first notification Jin-Woo had received about shadow enhancement since he'd recruited a Gris. Was this because shadow extraction had leveled up? Jin-Woo hurried to check out the new soldier's info. Level 13 Elite Knight. Since this guy came from a high-ranking A-rank dungeon boss, it made sense he'd be an elite knight like Fang. But level 13, Jin-Woo couldn't help but grin. It was the same strength he had when he was alive. Jin-Woo noticed something weird about the soldier. Unlike others, he couldn't tell if its powers had changed now compared to before. This tiny body was packed with a ton of mana, which was super strange. Maybe this little guy is actually the boss's real form. After all, why would a regular Naga be so much smaller than its boss? That just didn't make sense. It all made sense if the Naga was using magic to make itself bigger, just like Fang often did. Jin-Woo's idea seemed even more plausible because this Naga could use magic too, though it wasn't nearly as powerful as Fang. At that moment, Jin-Woo got the usual message asking him to name his new soldier. He didn't overthink it and decided on Jima. With that, a strong mage and an army of Nagas joined Jin-Woo's shadow army, ready to follow his orders. The hunter pulled Jima into his shadow as soon as they were done with the extraction. Right on cue, the dungeon, now without a master, sent a warning. Crumble. A small tremor shook the ground, signaling that the gate would close in about an hour. Jinyo hurried over to Jin-Woo. We have to leave, boss, he urged. Jin-Woo nodded firmly. Jinyo took one last look around the lair, and let out a disappointed smack of his lips before they rushed off together. It's such a waste, Jinyo said, staring at the giant dead magic beast. Imagine how rich we could get if we took this thing. But the gate is about to close, and trying to carry it out would be super risky. One wrong move, and they'd be stuck inside forever. Carrying such a huge beast was practically impossible anyway, but leaving it behind felt even worse. It was like leaving a pile of gold behind. Jin-Woo didn't see the problem though. We can just take it with us, he said casually. Jin-Woo blinked in surprise. Wait, are you serious? Isn't that thing too big to carry? Jin-Woo just laughed. No problem at all, he said with a grin. Truthfully, Jin-Woo wasn't sure if Shin could handle it, but he knew someone who definitely could. Come out, he called. Out stepped Fang, the former shaman of the High Orcs wearing his dark robes. He let out a low growl and bowed to Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo simply jerked his chin toward the massive cadaver on the ground. Begin, he said. In no time, Fang's body ballooned to twice the size of the Naga boss. Then, with ease he started dragging the giant corpse across the lair floor. Jinchul's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Whoa, he exclaimed. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Wait a second. Wasn't that the same High Orc shaman Jin-Woo had defeated during the Hunters Guild raid? Jinchul's eyes widened in shock. The minion was now twice as big as he remembered. But that wasn't even the weirdest part. When Jinchul cast a spell to make it bigger, he felt strange pulses of energy coming from the creature. It shocked him. This thing seemed way stronger than before. What in the world was going on? Wait a minute. Aren't magic beasts supposed to get weaker when they're summoned as minions? But if that's true, how do you explain the mana levels of the High Orc shaman? It doesn't add up. Jin-Woo can not only turn an A-rank dungeon boss into a minion, but also make it stronger. None of this makes sense. Manager Woo, are you coming? Jin-Woo's voice broke through Jinchul's stunned silence. If shock could shorten your lifespan, Jinchul would have lost half of his by now. Jinchul had a bunch of questions he wanted to ask Jin-Woo, but he held back because he was scared of what the answers might be. After a moment of hesitation, Jinchul sighed and said, I'm coming. Just then the reporters were about to take a lunch break when Jin-Woo walked out of the gate. What? Is he done already? One of them asked. No way, another replied. Stunned. Did Hunter Sung really clear the A-rank dungeon in just 3 hours? The reporters sprang into action. This was the big break they were waiting for. Every reporter with a camera rushed to the gate, ready to capture Jin-Woo on film. But the hunters from the surveillance team stepped in front of them, blocking the way. "Hey, move aside," one reporter shouted. "I'm not here to interview him. Just one picture, please," another pleaded. "If I don't get a shot of Hunter Sung, my boss will have my head." The crowd grew more heated as reporters and hunters pushed against each other. Then, suddenly, a loud boom echoed through the air. "Oh no!" a reporter cried out as their camera hit the ground with a sharp crack. The others stepped over it. But this reporter wasn't worried about the damaged equipment. They were too busy staring at something else. The gate was now wide open. "Narif! Thurthur!" He pointed at the huge creature coming out of the gate. "Oh, run now, take pictures. Hurry, you're getting this, right?" "Yes, sir." The reporters stopped fighting with the surveillance team and quickly started taking photos. Despite being scared of the creature, they kept snapping pictures as if something was pushing them to do it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Fan was working hard to pull the Naga carcass out of the gate. As he stood there, Fang could feel everyone staring at him. Curious eyes from reporters, police officers, hospital staff, and even random people on the street were fixed on him like glue. He was so tall that he towered over everyone else, which made him feel super self-conscious. Scratching the back of his neck sheepishly, Fang wished he could just disappear. Suddenly a man snuck into the large hospital unnoticed. His movements were stealthy and mysterious, making it seem like something big or bad was about to happen. He clutched the oil canister tightly, his senses on high alert. Normally, his eyes looked kinda dull, but now they were full of determination and fire. "How dare they look down on me?" he muttered under his breath. He was ready to give it his all, even if things went south. After wandering around for a bit, he found the perfect spot, a quiet hallway where not many people went. He started pouring the oil everywhere in that spot, real careful and precise. "You think I'd go down alone?" he said to himself, a fierce glint in his eye. Just a week before, he was walking down the street, totally drunk, and got into a random fight with someone he didn't know. Now things were about to get much more serious. He'd been beat up pretty badly and taken to the hospital. When he came to, he told the doctor to stop treating him because he couldn't pay. It was in that moment he saw how the doctor looked at him like he was worthless. That doctor, even though the man's face had gotten fuzzy over the past week, he'd never forget that look. He decided right then and there that he'd get his revenge. That's why he came back to the hospital. Getting old wasn't part of his plan. Anyway, after splashing fuel in every corner, he drenched himself with what was left. "You're coming with me," he snarled. The hospital was huge, so he knew he couldn't burn it all down, but he could take a few people out before going up in flames himself. If the doctor had been one of them, that would have been the cherry on top, but he didn't let it bother him too much. His life had been messed up because of gambling debts, but he wasn't going to disappear like others in his situation. He tossed the empty canister aside, and then pulled out a lighter. One light, one spark, and this miserable life would end in an instant. He stood there emotionless, his thumb ready to strike the lighter, and then he felt it. A cold breeze swept past him. But wait, how? There were no windows here. Something was off. He looked around, confused, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. The air felt weird, like a chill had settled around him. Then, in an instant, his hand closed on empty space. He glanced down. Where was the lighter? It had just vanished. He bent to search the floor, thinking he must have dropped it, but there was nothing there. Where did it go? His brow furrowed as he straightened up, staring at his empty hand like it had betrayed him. Something strange was definitely happening. He spotted something huge and black right in front of him. It was some kind of creepy crawly, but it had hands and feet. The man's eyes almost burst out of his head in shock. Before he could scream, the bug stretched out its hand and covered his mouth. He muttered through its grip. The insect let out a weird laugh. Cuss, huss, huss. Then it raised its other hand, pressed one finger to its lips, and gave him a serious look. Shage. The soldier knew he couldn't let this man cause any trouble, because the young woman he was supposed to protect, someone very important to the king, was sleeping just in the next room. The guy who was about to start a fire put up quite a struggle, but the bug-like creature didn't even flinch. Muds. The image of Baru's sharp, glowing mandibles stared back at the man through his wide, terrified eyes. Y level 100. Jin-Woo thought deeply about his surprising skill upgrade. As he zoomed back to the guild office, He had expected big changes at level 100, but instead his job-exclusive skills jumped a level at 101. Now he was trying to figure out why. Two ideas stood out to him as possible explanations. The first was the significance of the number 1. Don symbolized new starts. So maybe Jin-Woo's skills had been unlocked now that he'd reached level 100. Otherwise, Jin-Woo's face turned serious. He really hoped this wasn't the case. Maybe it's because his job changed at level 51, which could mean his skills got upgraded after every 50 levels. If this idea was right, he wouldn't get his next upgrade until level 15-1, which would be a bummer. He had been leveling up super fast lately, so he really hoped that theory wasn't true. As he approached the guild office building, it came into view, and he pulled into the underground garage below. Jin-Woo was the only one left in Boongo, the Ajin Guild's favorite van. Jin-Woo had offered to stay back at the gate to finish up some last tasks. Even though the raid was over, they still needed to hand over the loot they'd gotten to the brokers. Since Jin-Woo was the one who had first contacted them, he wanted to make sure everything went smoothly. "Leave it to me, boss." Jin-Woo could almost hear Jin-Woo's voice bursting with confidence. "I hope he's handling it well." Jin-Woo thought. It was awesome that their vice president was so eager. But maybe they should hire some more experienced people to help out. Jin-Woo decided they definitely needed to do that, as he drove out of the parking lot. Wait a minute, Jin-Woo noticed a familiar face walking toward the building. Han Shant also spotted Jin-Woo, and her reaction was totally unexpected. She let out a startled "oh," and froze. Then she slowly took a step back before turning around and bolting away. Wait, what's going on? Why is she running? Jin-Woo couldn't help but think it was all pretty ridiculous. And does she really think she can outrun him? Who does she think he is? His competitive streak kicked in, and without wasting another second, Jin-Woo took off after her, his super speed, thanks to Flash letting him move way faster than any normal person ever could. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion, but Jin-Woo's world was a blur as he zoomed past everything around him. He caught up with Han in the blink of an eye. Jin-Woo worried that if he grabbed her from behind or bumped into her, she could get hurt. So he leaped into the air, spinning around mid-flight to face her. When he landed, he was right in front of her. Han stopped short, unsure of what to do next. Jin-Woo grabbed Han by both shoulders, stopping her in her tracks. "Oh," she cried out. The chase between the two S-rank hunters ended as suddenly as it had started. Han couldn't meet Jin-Woo's eyes, her gaze dropping to the ground. He looked confused and asked gently, "Why did you run away as soon as you saw me?" Han didn't answer. If she was going to run, why come here in the first place? Jin-Woo asked, his voice soft but curious. If Hyan wanted to avoid him so badly, why bother showing up? Finally, Hyan's whisper broke the silence. "Hey, my car is still sitting in the parking lot," Jin-Woo mentioned with a smile, pointing it out. He remembered seeing an unfamiliar car parked there earlier. She had come by the office after wanting to join his guild, and he'd teleported them straight to the Hunters Association gym. So she never got a chance to pick up her car. She probably found out about today's raid, and thought we'd all be gone. Jin-Woo thought aloud. Little did she know, they finished that tough A-rank raid in just 2 hours. So they ended up here after bumping into each other. Under Jin-Woo's steady stare, Haring looked away, her shoulders slumping slightly. Jin-Woo let out a soft sigh and released his hold on her. "No need to run from me," he said with a reassuring smile. "It's totally normal to change your mind sometimes. People's feelings can be unpredictable, flaring up one moment and fading the next." Jin-Woo thought there was no need for Han to avoid others like that. But even after his reassurance, Han stayed quiet, her head down. Jin-Woo wondered if she was upset with him, maybe because he had grabbed her earlier. Well, he started to leave but stopped when Han quickly tugged at his sleeve. Han struggled to speak. Jin-Woo looked at her curiously, waiting for her to continue. Han hesitated for a moment, then found the courage to speak. "Could you spare me some of your time?" he asked. The woman he'd chased before now wanted to talk. Han's eyes widened in shock. Noticing Jin-Woo's confusion, Han quickly added, "Hunter Bayan Bu Min really wanted me to tell you something." Jin-Woo's eyes snapped with surprise at the name. "Huh? Me?" Jin-Woo blinked in surprise, his voice filled with doubt. Han nodded, her eyes wide with excitement. "He wanted to talk to you about your powers," she said, her words spilling out quickly. Jin-Woo was confused. He had barely known Hunter Man, just a brief interaction when he made him one of his temporary shadow allies. But in that short time, Hunter Man proved his worth by saving Hain from a dangerous situation. Now Jin-Woo wondered what could be so important that it needed to be shared even after the mission was over. Little did he know, this message might uncover something unexpected about himself. She only knew because of Hunter Min. But how did he even get the chance to tell her anything? Jin-Woo had never shown off his powers around Hunter. By the time Jin-Woo showed up to help, Hunter was already gone. This didn't make any sense. Pouts noticed the confusion in Jin-Woo's eyes and softly continued. Hunter-sung, your power is hold on, please, Jin-Woo said, cutting her off. Whether she was telling the truth or not, this wasn't the place for that kind of talk. Jin-Woo looked around cautiously. Let's find somewhere quiet to talk. Chairman Yu took the papers his secretary handed him. These are information from the investigation at Seoul Ilshin Hospital, someone replied. Chairman Yu's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages. This was the hospital where Jin-Woo's mother had been staying. One detail caught his attention. A nurse had entered her room that morning and found she'd woken up, and Hunter-sung was right there with her. Another interesting point stood out. The hospital had suggested a full checkup to evaluate her condition, but Hunter-sung had pushed for her to be discharged instead. Chairman Yu shook his head, confused. That doesn't sound like him. Hunter-sung was known for being super devoted to his mom. He'd even risked his own life on dangerous missions to pay for her medical bills. Why would he rush her out of the hospital now? But Hunter wanted her to leave the hospital without even getting checked. That didn't make sense at all. How could he be so sure she was better before the doctors had a chance to check her? Chairman Yu's confusion grew as he read on. Everything about Hunter-sung was puzzling. There was the weird double dungeon thing, his sudden second awakening, his mom's recovery, and that mysterious power of his that let him control an endless army of minions. Too many strange coincidences meant one thing. Nothing here was a coincidence. It all had to be connected somehow. Chairman Yu was clearly annoyed by everything happening. He made up his mind. I need to see Hunter-sung, he said. I'll send someone to get him right away. Secretary Kim replied. Chairman Yu shook his head. No need. Secretary Kim looked surprised. Are you planning to go yourself, sir? Think about who we're dealing with. Chairman Yu said firmly. Secretary Kim didn't know how to respond to that. Just then, Secretary Kim's phone buzzed quietly as Chairman Yu turned his attention back to the papers on his desk. Go ahead, his boss said, giving permission. Secretary Kim quickly checked his phone and found a breaking news alert. Sir, he said, looking up. Chairman Yu turned his attention to him. There's something big coming out of Japan. Should we take a look? Secretary Kim wasn't the type to waste time on unimportant things, so if he brought this up it had to be serious. Chairman Yu gave a quick nod, and Secretary Kim flipped on the big TV hanging on the wall. We have live reporter Sungwoo Park with some breaking news. The screen announced, switching to a live shot of Shinjuku in Tokyo. Japan, a place usually buzzing with life. But now, everything was eerily still. Cars, bikes, and even people were frozen in place, as if time itself had hit pause. Cars were stopping one by one along the street. Even though traffic was backing up, no one beeped their horn or yelled at anyone else. It felt like something strange had taken over the neighborhood. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the same thing. Whoa. What? There in the sky, blocking out the sun, hung an enormous gate. It was as big as a house. People couldn't believe their eyes as they stared at something gigantic taller than a skyscraper. The busy noise of the street disappeared, replaced by an eerie silence that made people feel uneasy, like they might throw up. The air at the Prime Minister's house felt heavy and tense. Crack! The Prime Minister slammed the remote so hard into the TV playing the news that the screen shattered into pieces. Prime Minister, his aides shouted, jumping out of their seats. But when he glared at them, they quickly sat back down. What does the Hunters Association have to say about this? The Prime Minister demanded. Shigeru Matsumoto, the president of the Hunters Association of Japan, sadly shook his head, looking hopeless. Since he came back from Korea, he looked really worn out. The Prime Minister scowled, looking angry. What the bat? He exclaimed. A creepy gate had suddenly appeared right in the middle of Tokyo, but the association wasn't doing anything about it. You're telling me they have no idea how to handle an S-rank gate? Right in the center of Tokyo, the Prime Minister shouted, clearly frustrated. The others in the room stayed quiet, not saying a word. The Prime Minister dropped back into his chair, looking super stressed, like the whole world's problems were weighing him down. "Be straight with me, President Matsumoto," he said, pointing at the cracked TV screen. "What happens if it blows up?" Matsumoto hesitated for a moment, before answering in a low, serious voice. "Everything ends." The Prime Minister nodded grimly, his worst fears confirmed. He wrapped his hands around his head and muttered, "I see. So Tokyo is doomed because of a single gate." "That's not what I meant, sir," someone replied. The Prime Minister looked up, his voice flat. "I meant it's over for Japan. Somewhere." "Quiet," he asked. But as Hain and Jin-Woo scanned their surroundings, they both grew nervous. Why were all these buildings here? They were surrounded by places where a man and woman walking in together would draw weird looks. Jin-Woo broke the awkward silence. "Hey, don't forget about your car," Jin-Woo said with a grin. Hain's cheeks turned pink as she nodded slowly. For a moment Jin-Woo thought she looked adorable. "Ready to head back?" he asked, gesturing toward the office. "Sure thing," Hain replied, falling into step beside him. Their walk back was a reminder that Hain wasn't just any ordinary person. She was an S-rank hunter, and her speed left everyone else in the dust. They moved so fast that a normal person would need 10 minutes to cover the same ground. Before long they reached the third-floor office. Jin-Woo pressed his thumb against the keypad, and the door clicked open. Jin-Woo walked toward the meeting room, but Hain stayed in the doorway. He threw her a confused glance. "Isn't it too dark in here?" Jin-Woo hadn't noticed because dim light didn't bother him much, but Hain needed more light to see clearly. "Liz." Jin-Woo flipped on the light switch. His guest glanced around the brightly lit office and asked cautiously, "Is nobody else here? Our vice president is still at the raid site." Jin-Woo replied, "Are there only 2 people in your guild?" "Are there only 2 people in your guild?" Avtoed herself when she saw Jin-Woo's annoyed look. Never mind. She was figuring out fast that normal rules didn't seem to apply to this guy. Kian froze. Wait, so are we the only ones here? She hadn't felt this kind of nervousness in a long time. Shelly, it might be the first time since she became an awakened being. Kian was way above most S-rankers, so how many people could actually make her feel restless like this? Her heart had been racing ever since he suggested they go somewhere quiet. She let out a little laugh, feeling like a regular person again, instead of an S-rank hunter. Hee hee. She giggled, clearly enjoying the moment. Jin-Woo noticed Hain trying to hold back her laughter. He thought it was funny that only 2 people were in the guild, which probably seemed silly compared to other guilds. The Hunters Guild was supposed to be the best in Korea, so having just 2 members must have looked a bit weird. Jin-Woo pushed aside his worries and walked into the meeting room, offering Hain a chair near the door. He sat down across from her, waiting until she was comfortable before diving back into the conversation. "So, what happened?" he asked. The air in the room suddenly felt heavier. "How could Hunter Min possibly leave you a message for me?" Jin-Woo's eyes locked onto hers, his expression serious and genuine. Jin-Woo didn't know much about Hunter Cha, but she seemed like the kind of person who wouldn't make up stories for attention. So he decided to take her words seriously. Anan hesitated, maybe trying to remember or just unsure how to begin. Finally, she lifted her head and met Jin-Woo's eyes. Her kind eyes were filled with sadness, and Jin-Woo could tell where her story was going. After a moment of silence, Anan started speaking softly again.